now let's turn through the front pages. The Sunday Telegraph says doctors wage war on NHS managers after Letby. That's the Sunday Telegraph there. The Sunday Times, however, says killer Letby was offered role at top children's hospital after witch hunt. So sticking to a similar theme there. The Observer, of course, continues with the biggest story in town. Now investigate hospital bosses. Letby trial expert urges police. Lots to be getting stuck into there. And the Mail on Sunday says, now raw to victory, lionesses. By order of the King. That, of course, the other big story this morning. And on to the Sunday Express. Boats crisis, EU revenge for Brexit. That's what the former head of the UK border agency has said. And to the Sun on Sunday now, race row star quits Emmerdale. That's a little left field story. Of course, it talks about the football as well. But the Sunday Mirror, back to the Lionesses and their big game in Australia later today. Lionesses, we can win. Or Lioness, we can win, rather. But let's turn to now perhaps the stories behind the front pages. A bit more of the detail in all of this. I'm delighted to be joined by the legendary broadcaster John Sargent. And John, there is so much across the papers. Two stories dominate. But perhaps let's start with the news that broke on Friday about Lucy Letby. You've picked out some interesting detail in the Sunday Times.
Yes, the Sunday Times have carried out a full investigation as to what they think happened, and it is, of course, a terrible story. And particularly poignant and grim looking back is a meeting that Letby had with her parents at the hospital in 2016. I mean, it's extraordinary, go as far back as that. And that's where the hospital management apologised to her and her parents. I mean, this is the grotesque moment. And the parents, and she is then told that the doctors who've been investigating it and believe that she was responsible or think she's responsible for murders at this point, these doctors say, the management at this meeting, that the doctors will be dealt with. This is the management speaking. I mean, it is extraordinary. It took, Sunday Times says, it took almost 2 years after the first 3 murders for the hospital managers to alert the police. Isn't that extraordinary? And one of the consultants says, in the same investigation, 4 or 5 babies who were murdered could still be alive now if they'd taken action then. So the whole thing is just, I don't know, it's one of the grimmest stories I think I've ever seen in a newspaper. It
is extraordinary to see how the management almost act to protect this nurse rather than looking into the whistleblowing that was going on. And this in particular, because one of those executives, when he became the executive of the hospital, had said he wanted the most open culture for whistleblowing to start with.
That's it. There's a video of him that's already been broadcast with him saying, you know, this will be what I'll be judged on. And this extraordinary sort of, I don't know, it turns out to be the most absurd pledge that he would always respond. And of course, when it comes to it, he doesn't respond at all properly. And this is the point that in the Sunday Times story, she is then offered a role as a master's degree in nursing and a placement at the Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool, a very important, very famous hospital in Liverpool. And to think that this killer could not only just be absolved from what she called bullying and accusation. So, no, we must apologise to her. But also give her a chance to continue her career at this top hospital. This is years ago. We're talking about, you know, several years before it became obvious what was going on. So it is a terrible indictment. The Sunday Telegraph says the management must be held account for what they failed these patients in the most grotesque way. It really is. I don't know what these managers are going to say when they finally come before the inquiry, but it's not going to be very convincing, I wouldn't have thought.
No, really some huge things for the inquiry to get stuck into, and some questions over how much power that inquiry will have. But we must move on, because there is another big story today, and you've picked an interesting contrast here between two stories in two different papers. The Sunday Telegraph carries the story that the Prince has apologised, Prince William this is, apologises for his absence at the World Cup final. But you've contrasted this with the story in The Times, which is talking about how Prince William has embraced his destiny. What's this all about?
Well, what's extraordinary is that you get these contrasting stories, really sort of saying that King Charles accepts he's a sort of caretaker looking forward to the real change when William will become king. And you think, oh, well, rather decent of Charles to talk about William in this sort of rather flattering way, that he's not going to be much, but he's just going to be the walk-on before the great man arrives himself, which seems an extraordinary thing to say for a king. But anyway... Especially
for a king who's been so vocal in his long apprenticeship for the job.
That's it, waiting for all these... Oh, no, I'm just sort of... I'll be seeing William in the job, but you then think, now wait a minute, why has this come at this precise moment? Why have the courtiers been saying this, very close sources? And then you contrast that with the Prince William sorry for not going to Australia, and the several reasons given. One of the ones which I personally don't agree with, which is that he's worried of his carbon footprint. I don't think so. No. But they think the other quote, this is from the Mail, saying it's not diplomatically sound, say sources.
Is this
of course, what they really mean is that the king has not visited Australia for 9 years. So he wants to make a big, substantial visit to Australia.
And doesn't want to be upstaged by his son.
Well, would he want to be? Now, look, we're speculating, we don't know. But it seems highly likely that, in fact, the king wouldn't be pleased if William went. What if the Lionesses win? And there's a great sort of wonderful, oh, how marvellous, and lots of supporters in Australia for our lovely Lionesses, and also for Prince William. And then, perhaps next year, the king arrives, not such an exciting visit.
Of course,
too difficult.
King Charles has once been upstaged in Australia before, in his first visit after his marriage to Diana. I wonder if echoes of this about... It is fascinating to see
all these things,
the mechanics behind how the royals talk to the papers, how the papers sort of show this sort of discussion sort of hiding in plain sight.
That's right. And you think, oh, no, you're being sort of silly, you're sort of making connections that aren't there. But we look back on what has happened in the last 20 or 30 years, and we do see patterns here. We see them, in fact, very worried about their personal standing, very worried about what will happen, very, very worried about how these royal visits will go. And the idea that Prince William would get this perfect visit at this time, oh, no.
Now, we are running out of time. Let's just jump to a quick culture war story, because Graham Linehan, the writer of Father Ted and the IT Crowd, lots of sitcoms, has written in The Telegraph about being cancelled.
Yes, he's written about being cancelled, and the effect of... He, in fact, did manage to put on a little show in front of the Parliament in Edinburgh. But it's a rather sad sort of piece about how... You know, he wasn't very funny, it was great as a protest, but he wants to get back to comedy. And it's rather sort of, I don't know, it's sort of extraordinary to think he's fed up with protesting. He feels strongly about the trans issues, feels that, you know, that women are being harassed and people are being cancelled because they're holding what he regards as perfectly ordinary views about gender and about sex. So, you know, there's a bitterness there, but also a feeling, can I just get back to my real job, which is writing jokes? It's a kind of, you know, it's the cry of the clown, isn't it?
It is interesting, though, because the venue, of course, that said that he couldn't perform there did point to some of the things that he had said in the past, which do seem pretty untasteful, calling the trans movement a perverted paedophilic movement. He said that almost every central figure in the trans movement is a nonce, that derogatory term, that term for paedophile. I mean, he has been pretty outspoken on this issue in a fairly distasteful way.
Sure, and he's suffered for it. I mean, because people have, as you say, those sorts of remarks have gone down very badly in the media world, in the world where he wants to work in comedy. He hasn't worked properly properly in comedy for 5 years. But of course, people think of the sublime series Father Ted, and they desperately want to forgive him.
Yes.
I mean, so, he's not a perfect campaigner, no doubt about that, but he is almost a perfect comedy writer.
Just in our last, really, 15 seconds,
yeah.
I want to test your Spanish.
Oh, yes.
This is something in the mail. What does enfermo cuno un loro mean?
Well, thankfully, the mail are preparing us for me may not win in Australia, right? So I happen to know what the enfermo como un loro, sick as a parrot.
And right? Nos lo robbaron.
Well, no, this is very important. We were robbed.
We were robbed. Well,
that's what you say.
Potentially words we may well need to stick by. John Sargent, thank you so much for going through the papers this morning.